Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of One of These Years. Have taken some time off throughout the summer. As you know, we're retooling the podcast. As you know, we'll have more on that maybe in a week's time, but that's right around the corner. And so is Colton, the NFL season. I'm, of course, Nick Baumgardner, along with Colton Pouncy. Colton, the Lions starting training camp on Wednesday, the 24th. Most of you will be listening to this by that day. Are we rested, ready to go? How are we feeling here?
Yeah, I feel pretty rested. I don't know about other people, but like when I'm in the off season, I like to do absolutely nothing.
Nothing? Yeah.
Like I did a little bit of travel like earlier in the off season. I went to Toronto for a weekend. That was cool. Went to Miami. But once it hit like post OTA minicamp, I was doing absolutely nothing. I was just chilling, relaxing, sleeping. That's exactly how I like to spend my summers. So I do feel rested, ready to go.
I'm the same way. It was a lot harder back in the day. The Athletic makes it much easier to do that, I would say, which I always give props to them for that. So yes, I'm the same boat. But I always find myself nowadays. It used to be I would get to this point in the year, and it would be that dread would start to set in. I don't now. You know, you're covering a good team, like being around good whatever. I'm not dreading this. This should be a fun year and a fun training camp more than anything else. I think that's what we're going to talk about today, Colton. Is that there's a lot going on beneath the surface in some ways. There's some star situations to look at in this training camp. We'll talk about that too. There's a lot of like underneath the surface stuff going on in this camp that's really important, not only for the now, but also I think for down the road. Would you agree?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you got some players that you need to develop, some young guys that need to kind of get some reps. But, when you're talking about position battles and, just the battles that will take place in training camp, you're talking about like backup spots, like second edge, wide receiver 3. It's like if those are your biggest issues, you got a pretty strong roster in place. Now that doesn't mean they're not important, and you got to figure out who's going to play for you. But like, I think they're in a really great spot in terms of roster health, guys that you can rely on that first and second team. So I think it'll be pretty interesting to watch it play out with some of those, under the radar spots. Like the football nerds will like that.
Oh yeah.
But at the same time, again, the Lions are in a healthy spot right now, so I don't think there's like reason to panic for much of training camp. Like you can kind of coast and kind of, have that peace of mind that you have a good team in place.
Yeah, when you go through the offseason and they've gotten through it unscathed, here camp's about to start, everyone's here. There wasn't any drama, and you made the additions that you made underneath the roster. But like, I think that they're in a situation, like you said, health-wise. Like I can't remember the last time the franchise has been in a spot like this heading into a season. It wasn't 1991 that everyone always talks about. That was a year that they were not expected to do well. That would have been maybe the year after that, and they fell apart. But this is one of those years where you look at it and you say, like, when we boiled everything down at the end of last season, you could say there wasn't a whole lot of holes. There were some, but they addressed those holes as we talked about this offseason. Now, when you go into camp this year, you're not necessarily like, we're going to talk about Jameson Williams here in a second, and he's very important, but you are not like, we'll be dead if he can't do, exactly what we want him to do. Will be dead. There'll be none of that. That's not a thing. There's no one person really on this team, with the exception of a handful, that are irreplaceable. And I think that's why the Lions are viewed as one of the teams to beat right now. That's why that's legitimately a thing, because it's not just they have star power or a couple guys that can change the game. It's they have answers for pretty much every question and every scheme and every system you're going to play against. Very few teams can say that. I think they have that right now, on paper anyway.
They absolutely do. And it's funny, like we're at the point of the offseason where, all these top 100 lists are coming out and teams are ranking like collective young talent for teams. And, you're looking around, the Lions are ranking very high in some of these categories. They're getting a lot of players on top 100 lists. So that shows you like it isn't just one or two guys carrying them. It isn't just 3 or 4 guys. Like you got a really talented roster of a lot of guys that could make a Pro Bowl, all pro spots, just be really good players and start for a lot of teams across the league. I don't know how often you've been able to say that about the Detroit Lions. I haven't been covering this team for too long, but to see the turnaround just a couple short years here has been pretty remarkable. And I think training camp will kind of highlight that as well.
So let's start at where I said we'd started with I think the biggest main event here again in training camp. But what a difference a year makes for the narrative and probably everything else. And that a year ago, if we rewind with Jameson Williams at this time, we were all sort of like, what's he going to look like? Is he going to be serious about this? Is he going to be healthy? How's this all going to go? And we got mixed results, as everyone remembers. He did not add a lot of weight. I thought he was serious about it, but he was not ready to compete mentally, I don't think, at the level that he needed to be. He got hurt again, goes away. and then was a different human being when he came back. So now it's for the first time you're seeing a guy come in after a good summer, after everything else, after, there's been nothing said otherwise. And unless we get a shocker here on Wednesday, like that's the situation you're walking into. So he's now going to be expected, and we saw it in spring, Colton, did we not? We saw a guy who was more focused, was ready to go, and was more importantly, was in tune with Jared Goff. So I think it's fair to say, if you're going out there watching practice, you should expect to see Jameson Williams doing something a little bit if you're going out there on one of those practice days, right? I mean, like that's the expectation right now, I think, for him going out there. Maybe not to be like Amon-Ra every day because he's out there making plays a little on every drill.
Yeah.
But we need to feel him, right? You need to feel him every day, I think, to some degree.
Yeah, no doubt. And like, I pay attention when coaches hype out guys that they don't previously hype up.
Yeah.
And I know a lot of fans, especially with JMO, because he's kind of this lightning rod of a player, but a lot of fans are kind of, I've seen some people comment at me like, oh, the coaches are saying the same old things they say about JMO. They hype him up and he doesn't do anything. He has 3 catches for a season. And to me, I'm like, were you paying attention last year, or were we like just watching 2 different scenarios? Because the coaches were very
They're
like
pretty critical of
limited.
him. Yeah.
They were critical, and they're also limited in their praise for him like this time a year ago. They knew that he had to kind of redeem himself after the gambling thing. They knew he wasn't going to be around for the first, what they thought 6 games, ended up being
Right.
4. And then he gets hurt like before, what was it, after the first preseason game, a little bit after that.
So I don't even know if he made it that far. Yeah, I don't even know if he made it that far. Like,
so
it was like a couple days of pads and he got
in
hurt.
August, yeah, as he went down, and all of a sudden, like, all right, that's it. You won't see him again until October. So there wasn't much to hype up. So I'm kind of confused by that narrative going on. And that's why I think like this offseason has been such a different, change of tone. And you kind of saw it a little bit during the season. Like they're like, okay, he's coming back. He's trying to work hard. We notice it. That was sort of the thing to me that kind of stood out. Like he hadn't performed yet, but like they were saying that he was taking it a little bit more seriously back then. You saw him blocking in games when he would get in there. You saw him go out all out max effort. Those little things I think were the precursor to what we're seeing now. And now it's this offseason. You got a full kind of schedule on your side, no interruptions. Just go be a dude, be one of the guys. And I think that's what we saw in minicamp and OTAs. Spent all of his time with the first team offense. Was right there next to St. Brown, Laporta. Running back to the huddle, talking to Goff. He is one of the guys now, and that was not the case a year ago. Last year, he was practicing with the second team and Nate Sudfeld. He's out there with Goff now, and I think you do notice this like maturity from him that I haven't seen in the past. Again, he's a lightning rod of a player. I understand you have to see it more than what he's shown so far through his career, but if he does kind of break out this year, I think what we're seeing now is sort of the beginning, and I think that's the Lions would love nothing more for him to be a dude on this team.
Absolutely. And the difference, I think, is that what we just talked about, the end of last season was the first time. And when I say the end, I mean like the last like several games, including the playoffs, was the first time that we saw Jameson Williams, maybe for the first time in his life as a football player, embrace and totally attack like a substitute role as an underneath reserve player who was not a starter, who was not he was not in the 4-minute offense on every single thing that they did. He was Josh Reynolds' backup who came in and did things that they asked him to do. A lot of it was just blocking. A lot of it was just, remember how many times, Colton, people would bitch? How many times is Jameson going to run that go route? They're never going to look at him. A lot of it was just running people off so somebody else, right? So somebody else can make a play underneath. Running his ass off and just doing all of the little stuff that nobody likes to do because they've literally told him in no uncertain terms, if you don't think that we'll give all of those sweeps and all the stuff that you're good at to Khalif Raymond because you don't do any other stuff, then you are wrong and you'll be out of here. And like, that's kind of what the bell goes off. He took advantage of all that and embraced that role. So now Reynolds is gone. And now you're going to ask him to move up into that, X, Z type role, starting role, and be a guy that's, dependable on third down, a guy that can, his hands are there if you want to make a play over the middle. And those are things that, frankly, we do not know the answer to because he's never been in that situation full time. But the flashes that we've seen late last season and during, springtime stuff, yeah, I think it's fair to be optimistic about where he's at right now. I think that the optimism they're showing as a staff seems to be both merit-based and, we want to keep his confidence up, of course.
Yep.
But it seems warranted because there's no other signs other than the arrows up with him right now.
Right. And I mean, Campbell called him a man on a mission to start, minicamp there. And I think that speaks volumes because they were not saying stuff like this around
No
this time
way.
last year. And like, I think when you hear stuff like that, it makes you want to watch him even more. I know he was always going to have eyeballs on him, but I definitely tried to study him this spring when we had that access, and he did look like a different player. He was, we see a lot of the go routes and stuff, but he was working stuff over the middle.
Right.
His hands are improving. I think they are. I really think they are. The
I
focus
thought
was
so too.
there. He made some like difficult catches, like in traffic, contested catches. Um, he drops them too. Like that's always going to be maybe an issue for him, but I think his hands are improving. I think he's learning how to run better routes. I think like the depth of his routes and Ben Johnson's system are getting better. He knows his responsibilities, where he's supposed to be. So I think all that matters. And I think he even talked about that a little bit when he spoke to us a couple months ago. He understands he's a guy in the system and that they're relying on him. He's not just like a fourth wide receiver at this point. He is
No.
their number 2 receiver, probably number 3 option behind Saint and
Damn,
Laporta,
yeah.
but a guy that has, the singular skill and his speed that can open up so much for the rest of this offense. We talk about it so often, but like adding that guy as a downfield threat on a regular basis where defenses have to account for speed, play to play, not just in situational packages, that's going to open up so much for Laporta, his yards after catchability, St. Brown, where how he always gets open and then finds the zone. Like that's I really think this offense could be better. And that's like a weird thing to say because they've been top 5 last 2 years. But like if that dude is doing what he's supposed to do and he's playing like a first round pick, this offense can be better. And that's
Yeah.
really kind of a scary thing to say.
He's the only thing they didn't have. He's the
Yeah.
guy that can really stretch and create space. And it's like, and he also helps Gibbs like with all that too. You know what I mean? Like
Mhm.
he helps every part of it. And the beauty of this, as you mentioned, Laporta's presence as the uniqueness of the whole thing, that they were fortunate to nail St. Brown and Laporta to where Jameson was the original first round pick. And he doesn't have to be that guy today. He doesn't have to be that guy in this offense. He does have to be a starter who's out there and doing things, and producing. But that's what the next question everybody asks us is like, well, what's a good year look like for Jameson in terms of stats or numbers? And that's really difficult, I think, because you have 2 guys that are super high volume catch guys in St. Brown and Laporta, who, I mean, shit, they could combine for 200 catches and no one no one would be shocked, right? I mean,
No.
those are 2. Gibbs is going to catch like 70 passes. There's not a lot. I don't think Jameson is going to have a super high number of catches, but the thing you're going to want to look at is, yards per target,
Yeah.
how many touchdowns, big plays. Like he is the big play guy and the guy that creates space and stretches and has to occasionally, like Josh Reynolds was able to do, deliver over the middle, be there on 3rd and long, and make tough catches, which he has improved at. I agree with you. I thought his hands got stronger, not all the way, but there were a couple times where we saw him bend back and make like really acrobatic plays that we all projected he would be able to do when
Mhm.
he left Bama. So there's been nothing to say anything bad about Jameson Williams and all the hype. I know people get nervous, but like I get why they get nervous, but it really has been a good summer for him. There's really no other way to say that. And I am very excited to watch him. I think everybody is. Everyone that goes out there, I think he's probably going to get the biggest pop if he comes out there and does what people are hoping, right? When the fans come
Oh
out.
yeah.
I think that's going to be a good, cool thing.
He'll get the crowd going for sure with
Yeah,
a couple
I
of
think
deep
so.
balls. Yeah. And going back to like expectations for him, I guess stat wise, I know people expect 1,000
Right.
yard seasons from him because he's a first round pick. To me, it's like if he gets 50 to 60 catches
Oh
for
man,
like
that would be awesome. Yeah,
800 maybe
perfect.
yards,
Yeah.
and then they're like he's averaging like 17 yards per catch
Yeah.
or something like that, and he's got some big playability,
And
and the
rushing.
explosives are there, and they use him in the run game. Like it might not reflect totally in the box score, but like a threat like that on the field, again, will make this offense better. So like
All the
that's
way.
kind of what I'm thinking for him. He could surprise, and they just maybe the Saints targets go down a little bit more. You give some more to JMO, Laporta. Maybe he goes down a little bit. You give some more of those. So maybe it works out where he does get 1,000. I'm not sure, but like to me, I think 800 is a good season. Like that's
Oh, great
great for a
season.
guy with his skill set, a speed
Absolutely.
guy that doesn't need the ball every down. I think that's kind of what I would expect for JMO.
Because, and I would say why this is a great season, because he's the only guy that we just mentioned, and all those skill guys, other than maybe Laporta, who will make, when he's doing what he's supposed to do, he will make every single person on the field with him better just
Yeah,
because of he's got the ability to stretch and do things that other people at his position cannot do. Laporta has some of that too, but not as much as Jameson, as we've seen. Like when he jet boosts it a couple times in the playoffs, it was holy shit, like what's happening here?
yeah,
And late last season. So that's the thing with him is it doesn't, like you said, it does not have to be, he doesn't have to be making 30-yard catches all the time. somebody else can make a 30-yard catch because he's bringing a safety with him, or they're freaking out about whatever, right? Like,
Yeah.
or motioning across and everyone's freaking out about that. That's him.
I was gonna say, like, if you're really hung up over the 200 yards, if he doesn't get, if he's stuck
Yeah.
at
Right.
800, he'll
Right.
probably be creating 200 yards for like
Way
Saint and
more.
Laporta,
Yeah.
and like that's the difference with JMO and
That
his
should be a
speed.
good stat, like just a yards
Yards
created
created.
stat for receivers. But he would be in there. That's I think that's how they're going to use him. I think it's a great role for him. That's not like a super high pressure role, and maybe he'll outperform. We'll see. But I think he's in a good spot. Excited to watch him. Another guy you wrote down on your Colton wrote a big story, a preview today up on the Athletic on everything to watch coming into camp. Number 2 on the list, when I agree with this one, is Henden Hooker, who,
Yep.
and this is a big time opportunity, this training camp for him. A lot of young guys, not just Hendon, but a lot of young guys are going to get a lot of reps in live physical camp practice because they are not going to beat up the starters, I don't think, in the trenches this year. Goff will probably throw as much as he wants to, but like if there's days where he's like, I'd rather take a rest, they're going to give the whole thing to Hendon, right? I mean, like
Yeah.
they're going to put a lot, I feel like, on his plate and see what they've got right here for the first time. And that is the other thing that's probably the thing I'm actually most excited to watch, is what we're going to see, what we will or won't see really from Henden Hooker.
Yeah, I'd be kind of surprised if Goff plays a snap in the preseason, like maybe one
Yeah.
series.
No,
But like,
he didn't
you know,
last year. There'd be no reason to do now. Yeah.
exactly. Unless you're just trying to get him and JMO some reps, but you can do that in joint
Practice.
practice.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, it's going to be the Henden Hooker show, and everyone's going to be watching him because for so long we've been saying, why aren't you drafting a young developmental backup? Like maybe early on is to save Goff's confidence a little bit and make sure like, hey, we're not pushing out the door. But I think once you got past that first year and once he's kind of cemented himself as a guy, that's when you kind of should have been looking. And they did. They got Henden Hooker. He wasn't ready last year because he was coming off the ACL. When he did kind of return to practice, we only had a limited window, maybe like 15 minutes at a time to see him. So this spring was really our first extended look at Henden Hooker. And for a while, we were like, hey, what's going on here? What's up? He's throwing high. He's missing some guys, throwing behind. He just looks a little off. Doesn't look like the player that we saw at Tennessee. And, some of that has to do with him transitioning to an NFL offense versus the kind of Mickey Mouse stuff that they run at Tennessee.
Sure.
But we learned really towards the end of the spring that, the Lions are totally reworking his footwork. And that's why he's kind of struggling a little bit. It's kind of like, work on the golf swing. Like it's going to look a little awkward until you kind of figure it out. So I think that's kind of what they were doing with him. Tanner Engstrand kind of had a good conversation with us, kind of walking us through like the timing of Ben Johnson's offense and the footwork necessary to play in it. And like Henden had not played in it. And now he was getting these extended reps to kind of figure it out. So they were kind of working on that this spring, which I think makes a lot of sense. You'd rather get that done earlier so that he can progress during the season and honestly training camp and preseason, which I think we're going to see this upcoming week. So I would expect him to be better than what he looked like in May. And if he is, like, that's great news for the Lions. Obviously, you want to see that guy develop. You want to see him go out there and, sling it around during the preseason. He'll get a lot of reps to do that. And hopefully, they'll end the season comfortable with him as the backup because Teddy Bridgewater's not here anymore. He's down in Florida coaching, having the time of his life over there. So Hendon's going to be the guy. Like, that's really not a question in my mind.
Yeah, and the challenges that he faces, you mentioned the offense he played in at Tennessee. It's similar to what Michael Penix is going to go through this year, whether the Falcons like it or not. It's that, the deep choice is, in college, when you've got guys that can just fly, and they did. They had Brew McCoy and some other dudes. A couple guys are in the league right now. Hyatt, some other guys too that were awesome. Tillman is the other one I was thinking of. When you got dudes that can just fly, you're creating these windows that are just deep. And Hooker was a very good deep ball passer, a calm player who wasn't afraid to throw the ball deep, a competitive player who's not afraid to take chances, pretty accurate. But yeah, there was no, 3 steps and a hitch and get the ball out on, at 1, 2, or 3. There was none of that in that offense. Didn't exist. So when you were watching him in spring and they were doing 7-on-7, that was some of the most frustrating parts for the Lions staff, I feel like, because now that's when you're asking him to just do the things that he's going to need to do to move the ball. Like when you watch Jared Goff, it's not quite like the old Bill Walsh days, although it pretty much is, where I feel like the offense is sort of all timing based in that if you're the quarterback, it's like if you can count to 3, you can play for me. If you can count to how many steps that you're needed and then just look where I'm telling you to look and then when it's not there, turn your head and look that way and throw the ball, we'll be fine. And nobody's really better at that than Jared Goff. He's one of the best in the NFL at exactly that. His feet are exactly the same every time he drops back. He knows how many steps in a hitch every time. He knows where the reads are, where they're not. Sometimes that things gets crossed up, but for the most part, they ask Goff to make so many difficult, easy throws. They are easy looking, but they're really hard, right? Like anybody who's played Madden, you know what I'm talking about. When you're trying to throw against the zone and they're dropping people all over the place, you have to know where everybody's at, and it has to be on time. Yep. And so that was the big thing with, like, we were out there practice one of the days toward the end of summer camp there, and Ben Johnson was having like a coronary, and he was not having a fun time. Whew. And a lot of it was because Henden had open stuff over the middle that was like 6 yards out. Yeah, and he just wasn't throwing it. And it was throw the ball, like you got to get rid of the ball. Yeah. So, yes, that's the big thing. And the footwork was number one on the list, and you had to wait until he was healthy to rebuild all of that. So the natural, like, why is that ball skying on him? Why is that thing looking weird off his hand? I don't think they were really worried about that as much. No, you want that to be better. He was an accurate passer in college. Everyone knows that. But, like, I think more concerned about what's he seeing? Is he making reads? Is he coming off stuff properly? Is it, because we can't just default at chuck the ball down the field and someone's going to be there. That's not how this works.
It did seem like he was either always trying to make the big play downfield, or he was waiting for people to be exactly like wide open to make the throw. And like, that's not the NFL, man. Like you're gonna have to throw it in tight windows. You got to get rid of the ball quick, otherwise you're gonna be sacked. And like, they weren't tackling because they weren't in full pads back then. So I think he thought in his mind he had the luxury of holding on to a little bit longer, and he would like escape the pocket in a 7-on-7. And it's like, no, man, like you're trying to get the defense better. You got to throw this ball. I think some players on the Lions first team defense were a little frustrated that he would not throw the
also,
ball.
You're not going to escape in a game. I don't know what you think you're capable of, but
you got some mobility, but come on, like you're not Jalen Hurts out there.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I think it's just, a young player still working, figuring things out. I think he'll be better in August coming up here. And I'm excited to see what he can do in the preseason, because he's going to get every rep, really. I mean, except for maybe some garbage time stuff with Nate when he gets out there. But he's going to get the majority of the work. And they're going to play the Giants, the Chiefs, and the Steelers this preseason. So I would imagine he starts all of those and gets the majority of the reps in all those games, and gets to work with his receivers and develop some chemistry with the second team guys. And, hopefully he's prepared for the season if he has to. Now, Goff has been pretty durable in his Lions career. The Lions have a good offensive line, so like they'll probably keep him upright, but you never know what can happen. And the Lions have been a team that has been very cognizant of the backup quarterback. Like they're the ones that submitted the rule about the emergency quarterback. They saw what happened to the 49ers a couple years ago, then that derailed their season. If Brock Purdy is healthy, and he was their third string quarterback, if he was healthy in the NFC Championship game, they might win the Super Bowl that year.
Right.
So I think they understand the importance of that spot now. So getting Henden Hooker ready to take over if needed is kind of on the list of priorities, I think, this training camp.
Yeah, I mean, unless there's another young guy that just walks off the street and really blows them away, which that never happens in quarterback. Like, I would expect Henden to get like at least one of those preseason games completely by himself. Like no one else comes in, like maybe even two.
Why not?
Like I could, the first week is at Giants and you're practicing out there. So I could see maybe you load him up in practice and maybe you let Sudfeld do some stuff and some other guys in the first game. But I definitely think that he's going to get at least one of those games where he goes the whole game, no matter what happens. And we joked about it, did we not, in the spring, about how after all the quarterback signings, like Henden Hooker is now one or two good preseason games away from being a valuable trade asset, whether you like it or not, because no one's seen him yet. No one's seen anything he's done.
Yeah.
So I'm curious too, having said that, with the first game, like, if he's playing well, maybe they give him the full game. If it's like still up and down, maybe we don't see him get the full game. Maybe that's part of the gamesmanship with it here. I don't know, but
for sure,
huge opportunity for him. This is like massive, massive stuff for a guy who's not going to get a starting job. You don't get a bigger one than this. It's awkward and weird, right? Because you do want him to be here and be the guy long term. The trade value thing is not something that you could ignore either. It's best of both worlds. So you want him to just be the best player he possibly can be for yourself, whether that be that you need him or that you have to move him, whatever it is. But it's that you're getting a lot of work and attention that you don't normally get as a backup. He's never going to get this again. I think that's the thing I would say at the end, right? Like once in a career opportunity right now for him.
And if I'm Henden, look, I see my starter just signed a new deal. He's going to be here
Mhm.
for the foreseeable future. He's already what 26. So it's like if I'm
Right.
Hendon, I'm using this as a showcase for another team, right? Like that's all you can do. I know he's a
Right,
team
for
guy and
both.
he's gonna want to compete to be the backup and everything. But like if I'm him, these are my games to show I can be starting this league, and I'm getting up there in age, and I need an opportunity. So like it's not gonna be this season because they're gonna need him. It might not even be next season, but like maybe that year after,
Who knows?
maybe you can trade him for a pick and give him that opportunity, and we'll see what he can do. But yeah, this time is important for his development, but also his career, his future.
We talk about it a lot on this show, and we have since the show has existed, but like, and really it's because a lot of our recordings happened post-COVID when the rosters expanded and the practice squads are what they are now. That's different. Development in the NFL is not only back, it's like a real thing. Like teams are taking guys and stashing them. You saw some guys drafted this year. The one dude hadn't even played football. He never even played. He was a lineman or whatever. The dude from I forget where it was from, but it was like one of those academies. Like they're fine with that. Like they can, if I can find a way to stash him, if I can sneak him on and get him through, we'll just keep figuring it out. And if it pays off in the end somewhere down the road, all the better. Like that's it. It's not lip service. I think that's a real thing because you can do that now. There's developmental leagues that exist.
Yeah,
It's a different world in so many ways with that. So I think that it's not just do we have a backup quarterback that can like, oh, we're playing like Minnesota this week and Goff can't play. Can we like sneak a win out here? That's all he needs to be able to do. No, he needs to be able to do that and also be like a guy who you'd be comfortable starting for a stretch. I feel like that's kind of how football is nowadays. A guy that if you had to trade him, you could and you can get something for him. It's a valuable asset of your roster. You're keeping one on your 53. It has to be valuable. I think that's how I would look at it.
yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
how everyone looks at it now.
I
Yeah.
think the Lions especially look at it like that. Like
Yeah.
they, even when Hendon was drafted, Brad said he's going to be here to be a high level backup. Like
Hmm.
Jared's our guy, but like we value that role. So who knows? Like I'm not sure how long he's going to be in Detroit. I don't know what the future holds, but like that is a very valuable position in the NFL today. And like
Yeah.
you see guys go down all the time. Cooper Rush for the Cowboys had them hum in a little bit when Dak went down a few years ago. Brock Purdy filled in, actually took over
Right.
that job. So like there will be opportunities for backups, just because you never know what can happen in this league, and all it takes is one play for your starter to go down and potentially derail your season. So yeah, those guys are important for sure.
It needs to be important too because when your backup is there actually pushing the dude and he's there for a reason and not just there to stand there so the starter doesn't get his feelings hurt,
Yeah,
everyone improves. When we can just tell each other the truth that there's only one Patrick Mahomes who doesn't need a badass backup, everybody else could use one. You know what I mean? So when
yeah,
we see situations like the Steelers, doing what they're doing, and people are like, "What the hell are you doing?" I'm like, I got no problem with that because like you don't know what's going to happen. Pretty much every team's going to go through it in a 1 to 3 year window.
yeah.
At some point, it is what it is. Okay, moving forward here, Jack Campbell, another guy that you mentioned, which I agree. Again, huge opportunity for him. They talked a lot about maybe this is the time he advances up to the green dot. But most importantly, I feel like Colton, his edge days are probably done, right? And he's just going to be a middle linebacker now or stack, which
Never
thank,
again.
thank God for
Never
him
again.
and for the Lions. I think that feels like a great thing for everybody. This is his home now.
Yeah, I mean, even that whole situation last year,
Very
like
weird.
it felt like they were just overthinking it.
I do.
Like
Yeah.
I get that. I don't know if they got some information from the guys at Iowa, because I did hear like maybe Kirk Ferentz was saying like, oh, if we put him at edge and let him rock there, like he would have been
He'd
a
have been
really good
fine.
player
Yeah.
there. But like he didn't. He was a linebacker. He was a really good one. He won the Buckus Award.
Right.
He was a Mike linebacker. So put him at Mike. That's why you draft him in the first round. And honestly, Anzalone's better at will. So I
Right.
didn't understand that. And you have a guy like Derek Barnes that can do that. He's kind of built for that Sam role, I think.
Better built for it. Yeah.
Because he did that stuff in college and he
Right.
loves doing it.
He's
Even today,
longer.
even
Even.
this
Yeah.
year, like I mean, last season in the locker room, he's like when they finally put him there, he's like, yeah, I like rushing
Oh
the
yeah.
quarterback
He's
in
really good at
after.
it.
Yeah, so it's like I don't understand what they're doing. Maybe they just felt Jack wasn't ready, and I totally understand that if that's the case. But I mean, that's on you to get him ready to play. Like you drafted this guy in the
Right.
first round, like he should be playing. So that was a little confusing to me last year, putting him at Sam because he just wasn't effective in that role, and they kind of let it go for a few games until they realized, maybe
Right.
this
That
isn't
was
for him.
yeah. That was more the
So
thing I was that they let it go. I didn't
yeah,
care that they tried it. It was like, stop it after a little while, right? And then
yeah,
eventually they did. Yeah,
yeah. And again, maybe some trial and error. You want to figure things out, but
right.
they've done that a few times. Like even James Houston trying to drop into coverage. Like just don't do that. Let
After a
them
while, you gotta just knock it off, right?
right.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
I get you
right.
want to add value to their resume, whatever, make them like earn their spot, but like not everyone can do it. If you realize you can't do it, there's no reason to keep putting them out there. But I digress. They are going to put him at Mike this year. It sounds like Aaron Glenn said that he is a leader of men these days. Um,
Yeah,
they let him kind of control the defense with Anzalone missed some time in spring. So he was kind of in the middle there. And he looked like he's becoming a dude, man. Like, I'll say that. I know he's still like the aw shucks type, the personality
yeah,
is kind of just what it is. And I think the Lions actually like that. He's just all about business. They do try to get a little bit of personality out of him, but he's just not that guy. But you don't need him to be. If he's a killer on the field, and that's what I've been saying. Like he's all business. He's got this quick first step. He's reading things well. He made some plays in the passing game. I think there's a day where he had 2 interceptions this spring. He almost like lit up Sam Laporta over the middle. Like he was running full speed and then pulled up, and it's like, brother, if they're in full pads, that ball would be on the ground and Sam Laporta would be on his ass, and that's his college
yep,
roommate. He was like not giving a single fuck about that. That was hilarious. Um, so I do think he's getting better, and I also think just even if he were the same level player that he was as a rookie, like get rid of the Sam stuff. Just when they put him at Mike as a rookie, if you bring that same player in 2024 with the added talent around him, he's going to be a better player because
absolutely.
you added DJ Reader, who's going to plug up that defensive line. He's going to make guys better around him. You're not going to have to sell out to defend the run like you did last year. Reader's going to he's going to do wonders for this defensive line. He's my favorite player they added. So you put
Right.
him in there in front of Jack. The guys behind him, Anzalone and Jack, I was kind of picking at the linebackers this offseason just to pick their brain about the secondary, and I did the same thing
Hmm.
with Kelvin Shepard. And one thing they told me was we can be more attacking than we were last year because of the secondary that we have. Like we don't
Right.
have to
Yeah.
drop
Good
as
point.
deep in our zone. We're playing further off the ball because of our secondary last year, like just being real, because they couldn't really handle those one-on-one matchups. And so now you have guys like Terry Arnold that's going to play, Carlton Davis that's physical as hell, and he's gonna start. That's why you traded for him. You have these corners on the outside that can match up and man, so the linebackers don't have to overcompensate for their deficiencies like they had to last year. And so I think that's going to allow them to play close to the line and like attack and make one-on-one plays that like I think Campbell can make. And
Yeah.
so I'm looking at him as a guy that can really take a leap forward just because the talent added around him, natural growth, and just figuring out this defense and becoming the true green dot Mike Backer in the system that the Lions believe they can be and that the Lions drafted to be, quite frankly. So he's a guy I'm really excited about. I actually wrote a kind of mini feature about him the other day, kind of encapsulating all of that and just from the people I've talked to this offseason. So, yeah, I mean, he's a player I'm definitely going to watch this spring or summer, I should say.
Mentally, and then personality wise, I should say, he is a taller, faster Chris Spielman. They're the same guy from back. If you go back and remember him, like I remember all the way back to the old days, you'd watch a Lions game with him out there, and John Madden, one of John Madden's favorite players was Spielman, and the old adage was, that dude was ready to play last Tuesday, like he was ready to go the day the other game ended. And it's just like that's the type of player that Jack Campbell is. It's robotic to a degree, but it's also like he loves football so much. And we did see that last year too, where he beats himself up. I think some of that is going away because he's playing faster and not worrying about it so much. And I think to your point about playing closer to the line, which is a good one because it'll impact everything they do, in the downhill to try to fit the run. I think ideally what they would, I'm wondering now out loud, ideally maybe in a perfect world, if Jack Campbell has the season they want him to have, if Derek Barnes, plays the type of season, the ball that he wants him to play, Houston, all these guys, it wouldn't shock me to see the Lions start messing with their fronts and to where you don't know how they're lining up. Kind of what Baltimore does, where it's amoeba a little bit, where it's now we've got Jack Campbell and Derek Barnes standing together over here on the edge. One of them's going to drop. We don't know where you're coming from. I could see them in time because they have the personnel to do that if they want to doing that. But you got a lot of guys that are like, they got to take that next step now to be reliable on every single down. Like the difference between Jack Campbell and Spielman is Spielman never missed a tackle in his entire life, right? He never. He ran like a 4.85 or something like this, 40, and tackled everything that moved. He was so confident in all of his reads and everything else. That was the thing where Jack sometimes would be a little hair off. But
Yep.
to your point, maybe if it's like, hey, we shave a half yard in your stance or a yard or whatever, it's faster. So it doesn't have to, you can be a little bit quicker to the ball. Maybe that'll help out. But yeah, I mean, I think he's definitely one to look at just from the demeanor, and like he seems more calm in a weird way because he's not a calm guy, but he
Yep.
does seem, you know what I'm saying? He does seem
He-
more comfortable with what he's doing, right?
He's settling in for sure.
Yeah.
And to your point about Spielman, as we know, is kind of not one to hand out praise. Like
No,
you kind of
never,
have to,
man.
you have to
Never.
you have to earn it with him.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw, he went on his brother's podcast, like the CBS
Oh, no, did he?
their show, and they were talking about Jack and just the process of drafting him and everything. And he was like, he's a leader. He can do everything on the field. And by the way, I think he's going to have a really good season this year. This is the guy that we drafted to play linebacker for 10 years here.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of perked my ears up when he's watching Jack all summer and kind of seeing his development, his growth. So if a guy like that is saying that, I'm going to have, you can't help but listen,
I agree,
right? Like,
yeah.
so I do think he's going to have a good year. I think he's going to be a better player than he was last year. I would have thought that anyway, even if the Lions didn't get better elsewhere. And then you add pieces in the secondary that, look, there's some questions there, but I think they're going to be better. I mean, it's hard to get worse than last year.
Right.
And then DJ Reader, Aleem McNeil playing together. I think it's going to be a nasty duo up front. Aiden's going to be better off the edge.
Mm-hmm.
If Davenport, they can get anything out of him, that's another solid piece along the defensive line. So, and oh, by the way, James Houston, Josh Pascal could get better. So you got all these pieces now that you're, all right, let's mix and match. Let's see what we can do. Let's help out our linebackers because they kind of had to make up for a lot of issues like around them last year. So I do think Jack will be better. And again, he's a first-round pick. You expect him to be.
And again, all evidence points to that. It's not just the coaches saying that, or the fact that Spielman says that is noteworthy, but it's not just that, because if you go back and you look at the end of last season, he did play really well. He played some of his best ball, probably his best ball games in the playoffs, against the best competition when it was on the line. You got to have it time. Jack Campbell was not a reason why they did not make the Super Bowl. Right? I mean, if they had made the Super Bowl and he'd had a game, we'd be talking about Jack Campbell. The nation would be talking about him. You know what I'm saying? Because of the way he played at the end of the season. And then you take the context that we just discussed, where he spent half of last season having to play two positions. That is now gone. They've done things in front of him to improve that. Like they've done all they can to clear out a lot of the clutter and let him just cut loose and play. And you can tell and that's what we're talking about when we say you can tell by the way he's more comfortable with how he's walking and talking and has control of the huddle. I think the guys, that's the thing too with him. I think he probably understands now that they all know him, and he's a weirdish type guy. He's not, I don't know if weird is the right word, but he's a quieter, he's different.
He's different,
and I think it probably takes guys, I think Laporta said that, like the first year they came in, like it takes guys a little bit of time to get used to Jack. If you're not, if you're not like Spielman or Dan Campbell or somebody you're cut from that type of cloth. And I probably did. And, I bet now everybody knows Jack. They probably got some weird, boring nickname for him, right? Or call him some old man or something like that as a 22-year-old.
Captain Jack, maybe?
Captain Jack, Farmer Jack, Captain Jack, whatever it is. But but they know him, they trust him. And I think that's the biggest thing, that you can tell that from everybody on the field. It reminded me of like a lot of the other rookies that we've seen go from year one to year two. Like Panay played a lot and Aiden played a lot, but they carried themselves differently as rookies than they did as second-year players. You're starting to see some of that from Jack, I feel like, right now, where you know what I mean? He belongs. He feels like he belongs, playing like he belongs. That seems to be showing up.
Absolutely. And I know I don't take PFF as gospel. I think it can be helpful and add.
They do a good job, though.
If you're also watching film yourself. So I went back and watched some Campbell tape like last week, and I did notice some, like in the second half of the season, I thought he was playing much better, and I think you see that on tape. But I did kind of look on PFF just to see if that matched what I was watching, and I looked it up. And from weeks 12 to 18, Campbell's PFF defensive grade was 72.3, which is 28th among qualified linebackers across the league.
Pretty good for a rookie.
His run defense was 77.8, which was 13th, and his tackling grade was 78, which ranked 18th. So you're getting a borderline top 20 linebacker play from that like last stretch of the season.
Yeah.
So if he can build on that and do it over the course of the full season with better talent around him and not playing this hybrid role that he wasn't meant to play,
Right.
you got a pretty high floor player. Because the thing with Campbell, that like a lot of people look at the coverage numbers and they weren't great. I think some of that also has to do with the secondary play, but I think with him, it's like the range that he has. If you allow him to play in range,
Oh my God, I know. So
he's
athletic.
there's a PBU that he had against the Chiefs in week 1 where he's like he flips his hips, gets around, and then sticks his hand out, and you see the length from a 6'5" linebacker, and he breaks up a
It's
pass
crazy.
from Mahomes to I think Kadarius Toney. That to me showed me everything I needed to know about him. I'm like, if he's doing this as a rookie, if he finds a way to do this consistently, he's going to be a damn good coverage linebacker and a guy in terms of a guy that can eliminate range in the middle of
Oh
the
yeah,
field.
it's insane how much he can cover. Insane.
So like when people talk about coverage, that's what I look at. It's not just like, oh, this running back caught a 5-yard pass on him and maybe broke a tackle or whatever. Like, well, that's whatever that happens in the league. But if you can eliminate space on the field with your athleticism, remember his RAS was like 9.98,
Oh
one of
yeah.
the highest of all time.
Yep.
The length, the size, like that to me, as I think he can be a plus. And oh, by the way, he's physical. He's got the size. He can, I think with more time, he'll be more instinctive. And so, like, I think all of those tools together make him a very high floor linebacker. And like, maybe he's not a first round pick. I know some people had some issues with that, but like, if you're telling me I can get a high level linebacker for 10 plus years at pick 18 in a draft where you don't know what's going to happen, but he's the closest thing to a guarantee, I have no issue with that if that's the player he's going to become. And I think his traits and his mindset and his leadership give him that high floor to get there.
There was a play when he was at Ohio State, really quick before we move on.
Oh, I know what you're talking about already.
When
Yep.
when he was in Iowa against Ohio State, when Stroud was there.
Yep.
It's the one that Holmes referenced when they drafted him. It's the one where he takes away the low and the high-low read at the same time.
Yes.
Right? Which is like, what the fuck? Like, you can't.
Crazy.
Like, and he played it perfect. So, the point there is that was starting football, high-level college. It was peak version of college Jack Campbell, as comfortable as he was ever going to be at doing everything they were asking him to do. When he gets to that point as an NFL player, the theory is, yeah, he can do some of that here too. He can take away double reads at once, which is basically he took away half the field. Yes. That's what he was doing as a linebacker. Yeah. That's why Iowa never got the ball thrown on them, or no one ever moved the ball, because they had guys like that. And like, he's my pick for the most improved guy if I had to make one today, because like all the evidence just points to it. There's really not, unless he gets hurt, there's not a lot of evidence that we've seen to say that he's not going to have a good year. I think he's going to have a very, very good year, possibly a Pro Bowl type year. I mean, like, that's how I think of him as a prospect. And I don't think I'm alone. I think a lot of people expect similar of him. I don't think Spielman's alone either. I think that's maybe a league-wide thing on Jack Campbell.
I think it's getting there. And yeah, I'd have to verify this. I'm going to say it anyway, but someone commented this on my Campbell story. I believe 9 of the last 10 Buckus Award winners have made at least one Pro Bowl in the NFL.
Yeah, he'll be all right. So he'll get there.
And then, I think so.
Another guy who's basically already there, Brian Branch, who had, when he was healthy, had a terrific year last year as another guy to watch. And I think for him, Colton, for me, it's as interesting to watch what they do with him and where his home base is in camp. Because is he going to be a safety, or is he going to be the nickel? Or, is Melifonwu going to do that? Is Kirby going to do some of that? What's going to happen there in terms of the rotation? Who's going to play with who? Or is it going to be mix and match? I don't know. I mean, what's your thoughts or theories? Do you have any, or are you, I guess we'll wait and see how that's going to happen on where he's going to land.
Yeah, to me, he's like the key of the secondary this year, because wherever he lines up full time will have a trickle down effect everywhere else.
Yep.
Say he's at nickel. Then you're going to have a true competition on the outside at corner between Terry Arnold and Amik Robertson. And those two dudes will battle it out. The best man will get the job. And then I think you'll see Kirby and Iffy at safety.
Yep.
Now, I kind of go back and forth, because like, I'm not confident that like they want to play him at safety full time. I know they've mentioned it, but sometimes I wonder if that's just maybe some of us in the media have kind of overblown that a little bit, because Campbell told us that, I believe that was at the owners' meetings, that they want to get him some more reps. Now, I think that's what he said, a little bit more reps at safety. That doesn't sound like full-time starter reps, but like it could be enough to where like you have to adjust elsewhere. So maybe nickel is still his permanent home. but you get him, extra 100 snaps at safety, and that kind of has a trickle down effect.
Right.
So maybe that's it. But if it is like, no, we drafted him with the idea that he was going to play nickel early on until he's ready to learn that safety role and take on that responsibility of seeing the whole back end. And he wasn't ready as a rookie, but he's ready now, and we want to put him there. If that's what this is, that also has a trickle down effect, because I think if that's the case, you will see Amik Robertson take over at nickel. Maybe Ennis challenges, but like Ennis Rakestraw, but I don't think he's ready yet. Based on what I saw in the
Right.
spring, like they had him kind of over on the
We need to see a big camp from him.
there's the varsity and the JV field, like
Yeah.
we like to say. He was more on the JV side, whereas some other guys were on the varsity. So I think he's going to need some time. But I think Amik Robertson will be your nickel. You could see Branch at one safety spot. And I know people are kind of down on Kirby because of the year he had last year, but Kirby's center field range and ball hawking skills are very much valued by this defensive staff. You kind of sense that talking to some of the guys. We talked to Jim O'Neill, one of the new defensive assistants here.
Yeah, they're elite. He's elite at that.
They love Kirby still. Like he was playing hurt, we found out. So like I think that adds some context. So if you put Branch at one safety spot, Kirby at another, that probably moves Iffy to the bench. But look, you put Branch back at nickel on a certain look, and then you put Iffy back there next to Kirby. And you can mix and match based on personnel. So like that's why I'm curious to see where he ends up landing. I put him in my preview story because I think he's one of the most important players on this defense, especially in the secondary. So wherever he lines up, I think we'll have that trickle down effect elsewhere on defense.
Yeah, I mean, the more we look at this and the more you talk about it, I mean, it certainly seems like to me that they are trying at least to be as flexible as humanly possible in all areas of the field defensively. It's not the same, but it's not unlike what Baltimore does. I think the more I think about it, like in a perfect world, I wonder if that's Aaron Glenn's perfect world, is to be able to play like the amoeba, like we're going to mix and match fronts and we're going to mix and match coverages, and you don't know what we're doing. We're going to have like 8 guys out there who could fill any spot, and you don't know what we're doing. You know what I mean? And they have guys at every level who you don't know what they're doing. Like Brian Branch could line up at 5 spots, and you don't know what the hell is going on. We just talked about one with Jack Campbell, right? They've got Hutchinson and all these other guys up front that are athletic and can move around and do different stuff. Houston, like, it really makes me wonder. And all their linebackers can rush and blitz and do different things. If we won't see more of that, if that might not be a wrinkle this year, I'm just saying that off the top of my head. I have no idea. Like, are we going to at some point see, them? Yeah, just start tinkering with Branches getting some reps here. Now he's moving over here. You don't know where, that to me feels like, because I think he could handle that. And I think the idea would be get him comfortable at nickel because he's going to be a nickel. But we want him to be comfortable and confident if we drop him and say Kirby's coming or playing up and you're going back. We want him to be comfortable enough to do that like a starter. So you got to get more time. That to me feels more realistic. And if that's happening, that's really cool. And that people should be excited about that, because if they're going that way, that would be awesome. I mean, I don't know if they will, but like they have the potential to, because they have a lot of talent, a lot of athletes here.
You're essentially talking about positionless football.
Yes.
Defensively, which
pretty much, except for DJ and some of these dudes who can't get out of there. But yeah, that's what Baltimore does.
And that's a really cool thought, because you look around, there are so many guys that can do more than one thing. And I feel like that's very much intentional when you bring those guys in.
Yeah, it's not accidental.
Like, Branch can play everywhere if he can move around. I think we saw them experiment. I think Barnes can play at Sam. He can play the Mike. He can play the Will. Anzalone can play Mike or Will. Even Mekhi Wingo, the 6th-round pick, that he's playing some edge and some defensive tackle.
Pascal does that too.
Pascal can move inside. Kaminsky can move inside. You have all these guys that have that ability. They're Matthew Betts, the CFL Defensive Player of the Year. He's playing some Sam. James Houston, they've experimented a little bit. Even Levi's talking about playing some edge this spring, and that's something they want to get him more reps at. So, yeah, you look around and they're trying to throw. They're going to throw the house
going
at people.
On.
Yeah, something's going on. They're cooking something. Aaron Glenn is in his bag, ready to put together a good defense, I think. So, positionless football, is that what we're seeing in Detroit?
Something's going on here. I mean, I feel like they're at least capable of doing some of that, right? Yeah. Because we know Aaron Glenn very well on this show, and like he is not a guy who's ever going to be comfortable being a passive coach or anyone that you could even consider to be running a passive type system. And, when you think of aggressive football in today's game, you think, or in any game, really defensively, you think of blitzing, and the risk that comes with it. There's more you can do to be aggressive and take some of the advantage the offense always has out of their hand. And I do wonder if mixing up and moving guys around, you can't do that until they're ready. And that's the thing they've talked about so much. Is anytime I ever ask, like, hey, what do you think about this? That, they'd be like, no, 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 we're not doing any of that. And it would just be like, shut up. Okay. And then you're like, well, long term, that's obviously a thing that is on the table. And it's just, you don't draft this many guys and sign this many guys that can do multiple things by accident. And you don't make Jack Campbell play edge for 6 games and rush the passer for nothing. You know what I'm saying? You're trying to see everything that everybody can do. And I think the best coaches, and I think Aaron Glenn is on the list of the best coaches, the guys that think about defense that way. Every year they go into it and they'll take my best 11, my best 15, and we find a way to get the maximum out of them to make the most chaos. And like that is, I feel like what they're trying to do. So I do think you'll see some more weird lineups, if nothing else. Maybe not positionless, but I think we'll see some lineups this year that you're like, whoa, what's that? I didn't think about that one. You know what I mean?
And they will have to pick and choose their spots because
Mm-hmm.
I'm not totally confident that like
Got to be careful.
they'll be able to pull the plug when they need to, because
Yeah.
that's been an issue for them over the years. But I am curious to see what they do, because I do think they can present some odd looks, some weird fronts, and kind of throw teams off guard. So yeah, I'm fascinated by that. That's really good. I'm glad you brought that up, because
they're as versatile athletically as anybody. We see
Yeah.
all these young. ESPN I think they did a thing on young talent, right? And the Lions had a crap load of guys on that list.
7 on the first or second team. Yeah.
Yeah, the top 100's coming out right now, and they're going to have a bunch of guys on that list, and they're all going to be guys that are under 25.
Yeah.
Like they've got really good young athletes on this team, and it's hard to say with the defense. Like I feel like they're building an offense that is built to last beyond Ben Johnson. I feel like their offensive system is built here with Dan to last beyond whenever Ben Johnson leaves. That whoever the next person is that runs it with Campbell will be whatever. It's harder to do that with the defense if your head coach is not a defensive coach. But this is a unique situation. The Ravens did that. Other teams have done that when they have a head coach that everybody believes in, and they say, let's just buy in here. He wants a system. He wants a certain thing and a brand of ball played the way that he coaches. And if AG is trying to do that for Dan Campbell, then it wouldn't shock me at all if we see some weird stuff, which could be cool. I think they, like you said, they need that. Yeah. I think that's how those guys are most comfortable, when they're just cut it loose and let it rip.
And I feel like he's been trying to do this for a while, but
I do too. They're just never ready. Yeah, they're always hurt.
Never been ready.
Too young, whatever it is, and just like I feel like this is the closest it's going to get, probably.
Yeah.
Before we wrap this up here, the rookies. You mentioned Terrion and Rakestraw, and I think they're obviously going to get a lot of time and chances to play. All of those other guys, I think, are going to get a lot of time in camp, and a lot of time. Like Giovanni Manu, is going to get a lot of time because they need to see. Mahogany, same thing. Like I think I said before, like wouldn't shock me at all if he's starting by the end of the year.
Yeah.
Wingo, you mentioned, even Sione Vaki. I think all of the young guys are going to get a ton of work in camp, and it's going to be super interesting the week that the pads go on to see this entire rookie class, especially those guys that all went on day 3. Manu is like that. That's like front row viewing in some ways, because if he's more advanced than they thought, So, like those are answers to questions that we'll get here soon. Very curious to see how all that plays out as well.
Yeah. And like going back to the varsity JV like comparison, I believe 4 of the 6 rookies were on the varsity side, and that was Arnold, that was Vaki, Mahogany, and Wingo. So those 4 were on the varsity side, whereas the 2 that were kind of getting up to speed, and that was Ennis Rakestraw, because he was playing some nickel. He didn't play that a ton at Mizzou and kind of needed those reps. And he was also injured.
Been banged up too.
He was a little injured too, so I think that's part of it.
Right.
And then Manu. And so the thing I'll say about Manu, I still think he's a developmental guy, very much so, and I don't think we'll see him on the field for the first maybe 2 years.
Right. Yeah.
Unless there's an emergency where he needs to play. But at the same time, like you mentioned, I think he'll get a lot of rests because he's going to be on the roster. You can't afford to leave him on the practice squad. Someone will scoop him up. So he's going to have to get a roster spot. And if he's on the roster, you got to develop him. So you got to get him a lot of snaps in the preseason and training camp and get him up to speed as fast as possible. And he's going to be playing, I think, guard and tackle a little bit. It sounds like they're going to cross-train him. So you got to make it worthwhile if you're going to have him on the roster. So I think they are going to accelerate that development by getting him a lot of snaps in the next month
I
or so.
agree.
And that's kind of how you can do that. So I don't know. I'm curious to see how the offensive line plays out. You always have a lot of camp bodies, but like looking at the depth, like I was looking at like some roster projections and trying to craft my own, and it's like you look at the offensive line, you got your 5 starters.
Yeah.
From there, it's probably Sorsdal, Skipper, Mahogany, and Manu, and that's 9 right there.
Yep.
And like those are a lot of young dudes besides Skipper.
Right.
So it's like I don't know. Maybe you can
Unproven
get to
all
10
over.
and get someone with game experience if you want to add someone else there. But like,
Yeah, they got to see with Manu for sure.
they have to see.
And I think Mahogany is a guy that's capable of being a dependable if he needs to play. There's too much to like about him, and especially the raw parts of his game. And I did a video on the YouTube channel. You can check it out now. It's on the channel up. But like, there's all the raw parts about his game. I think you can cover up here because you've got such a good offensive line, and then he can grow into it. He's like, if I had Jack Campbell as my most improved player, Mahogany would be my best rookie. I feel like in some ways, maybe not because of Arnold might be your best rookie, but like the guy that you were surprised about. Because it's just to go that low. I still can't believe he went that low. The power is too good. I mean, that's what you mentioned earlier. He's a Larry Allen guy. I wonder why he played just like that's a big fist fight every time he plays. He's exactly what they want. I just can't see him not being involved in some way.
It had to be a medical thing that people were scared of.
Yeah, right.
Like, we'll take him at this point in the 6th round because he was
he's at
Dana had him top 100 or some maybe top 115.
Yeah, like if you'd have done the draft, if you'd have like when this dude was a sophomore, like people were like, this is a holy shit player. That's what people thought of him. And then he tore his ACL and then everything sort of, you know what I'm saying? So he had a rep like 3 years ago. And it dimmed some as we've seen, but it's still in there somewhere.
Like we were saying this, I think in our pre-draft episode, he feels like a guy that is going to start for 10 years in the NFL.
I agree. Yeah.
Even though he's going to be a 3rd, 4th round pick, and if he ends up going to the 6th, and that's a steal. If he's still that guy and you get him in the 6th round instead of the 3rd or 4th, another steal for Brad Holmes. That's all I could say.
I know him and Wingo feel like just the 2 easiest dunk steals that he's ever had. Like just
with Wingo, I'm like, this guy's going to play this year.
Absolutely.
Like, I really think that. Like, he's going to be in the rotation. The fact that he was already with like the varsity side, like in spring, told me like, oh, they like him. They see him as a versatile piece. He's got the interior juice that you want, but they're also going to put him on the edge and let him rock out there. And I'm like, okay, so a team that needs some pass rush juice, you add that guy in the 6th round, he can play for you as a rookie. I don't care. Don't expect him to be a 8 to 10 sack guy, but if he gives you some pressures,
wait till they put him in between McNeil and Hutchinson and let him go get it.
Oh boy. Yeah.
Okay. When he gets a single or a running back on him, you know,
the NASCAR package. Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah.
That's what
James
he is.
Houston, Hutch.
He's the James Houston of the inside, is what Wingo is. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, for sure. That'd be fun.
Don't be surprised if he has a similar James Houston type impact. It would not shock me because he's not a 6th round talent. He was higher than that, I would say. But yes, should be interesting to see. You got anything else, Colton, before we get out of here that you're watching specifically heading into this week? Ads won't come on for a bit, so you got a little bit of time. But yeah,
we got time to talk about the kickers.
Yes, always. Yes,
you got Jake Bates.
Big
in here
week
now.
for them. We do. Yes.
Very excited to see Jake Bates and
Panthers legend.
Yeah, I mean, Duke can hit from 64, and he was doing it at your building. So like, I actually wrote about him earlier in the offseason. I do think however they go with that kicker decision, I think is going to tell us a little bit of how they want to operate this year.
That's a good point.
If they run it back with Badgley, I don't think Campbell really wants to get away from his aggressive mindset and probably thinks as long as we get a guy that's pretty much automatic inside 50 or 45, whatever, you know, I'm cool keeping that guy that we can trust from like 40, 42. And then we'll just go for it. On 4th down, 4th and 3 from like the 50-yard line. Yeah, we're going to keep going for it. But if they go with Bates, and obviously it has to be a close competition, can't just be like one or the other. If they're both close and they go with Bates, that tells me, hey, I think it's time that we can scale back some of the aggressiveness. That's still going to be our identity. We're still going to go for it. But like we have this guy now that we feel comfortable setting out there for a 55-yarder in our building, and we know that he can hit.
Right.
And like I think that can be the difference to where you take the points more often. than you probably did last year. That probably allows for some peace of mind for some of those people that are more traditional and
Right.
just want the
Right.
three.
Yeah.
And I think Campbell, like if he had a reliable kicker, he would probably do that more often anyway.
I
So it's
agree
like
with that
if
completely.
Bates is your guy and he proves himself in training camp, I think you go with him. Because you've seen what Badgers can do. And honestly, if you cut Bates, he'll be scooped up in a second. The Packers
Yep.
tried to get him, some other teams looked at him, and he chose to stay in Detroit because he likes it here and he wants to, compete and play for a winner. So it's like you cut that guy, he's scooped up
He's
immediately.
out. Yeah.
You cut Badgley, you could probably keep him around the practice squad if you want, because he's
Right.
kind of been one of those guys that's bounced around. So that's kind of where I see that kicker competition going. But at the same time, Bates can't go out there and go 2 for 5 every day. And
Right.
but one of those
Big
is from
preseason
60,
for him.
66.
Yeah. Mhm.
And like,
Yeah.
that's not why you keep him if he's going 2 for 6 or 2 for 5. So like it
Yeah.
has to be a balance there.
Can't quite be the Quinn Nordine career here where everything is a 60-yard field goal or nothing.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it can't be that. But like I 100% agree with your thoughts on like Campbell's calculus with the aggressiveness. I think that it's always been the kicker's ability and his comfortability with that has always been part of the equation. It's part of everyone's equation, and it changes everything about how they make calls between the 40s, but not every week necessarily, right? Like I think it would always be situational. Like in some cases where it's a tight game and you don't know, and you think you can get stops, then do it. But if it's in a game where it's like we're not getting any stops, it doesn't matter. Let's go. Like we got to go. So, but I think it would just give them another option, so they wouldn't be as predictable, and it really would make some of their calls on third down even more impactful. Some of the long runs that they've had, because you really truly wouldn't know, because it's like if they've got a guy who can hit from 55 and they're comfortable in it, and it's 3rd and 9, you have no idea what the hell they're doing from like the 51 or something, or from the 49 or whatever it is, right? So like that was sort of we talked about that in the spring, right? Like that was sort of my theory too. Like that's why he's here. They've probably always been looking for the distance guy. It's like we get a guy who can really hammer it from 50 and out, then that's all we want. We're never going to kick a 41-yard field goal anyway. Like we're just going to go. You know what I mean? Or a 38-yarder or whatever, I guess, right? But that's what you want. You want a guy with the big leg that can make the big money kick, that can shorten the field for you and all that. And if they can do that, I think they would have always been doing that. And people would go back to the Prater decision. Why did they just hire Matt Prater? Well, he wanted all that money and he deserved it, and they couldn't pay it to him because they didn't have any to give.
Yeah.
Right. At the time, it was like they were terrible. Yeah. So like now you can start to think about that a little bit, I guess. So we shall see, though. Yeah, we'll see.
And they've tried to find that big leg kicker. Like every
year they have. Yeah,
it was Riley Patterson versus Parker Romo. Parker Romo could hit from 60 in camp.
They got the Michigan guy in there too now this year. The other one.
Yeah.
Turner.
James Turner. Yep.
He's got a big leg.
But he got cut for.
Did he get cut? Yeah.
I think he's with the Packers now.
So there you go. And he got picked up too.
But he was the big leg option before they got Bates. So like they've tried to do this reliable guy that can hit from inside 40 versus the big leg guy. And the reliable guy would always win because the big leg guy couldn't hit consistently from within like 40 for whatever reason, which is crazy. So they've had to go with a Patterson or a Badgley out of necessity. But if Bates is closer to that level and can bridge that gap and can also give you the 55, 60 stuff, you go with him. I think it's pretty simple. Yeah.
Yeah. And you can't tell me that if Dan Campbell trusts a kicker that he wouldn't put the guy out there in like ridiculous situations and just fully expect him to make it. Like that's that type of shit where it's like, what is happening? Like, why is he 67 yards? And
I want to see him kick a 70.
Right. We had no doubt, it was
that'd be so funny if they just went from like going for it all the time to kicking 70-yarders. Like the balance would be wild to me. I would love to see that.
Well, it could be in the cards if Mr. Bates can follow up his UFL performance. I guess we'll see. But that'll be another one to watch as camp gets going here, start this week. And, of course, we'll be out there, check it all out. Pads won't go on for probably a week or so. Usually it's about somewhere in there. So probably about the time that the fans can get to heading out there. But in any event, podcast back on a semi-regular schedule here. We'll be back again, I think, next week, right, Colton? And then we've got some news about the future of the show coming up after that, so stay tuned for all of that as well. Some exciting news, not disappointing news. Exciting news, more podcasts, all that sort of thing. In any event, excited for the season. Excited for the football to be back. Bored with the summer, ready for that to be done. Excited for the season. So for Colton, I am Nick. Thanks for listening, and we'll talk to you again soon.